Welcome. I'm glad to be here as part of this exciting time in the life of Grenada, in the end times of some have said. My name is Irwin Larrier. I'm a native of the island of Barbados, and this is actually my fourth trip to Grenada. My wife is a Grenadian citizen, and her mother is from Grenville, and her father was here doing a lot of work, planting churches and so on. I'm here at the invitation of I call her affectionately Auntie Ellen, and she's the pastor of this church. And I'm just happy to come today to talk about a few things. Let me begin by saying we all have a purpose. We all are called to do something as believers in Jesus the Christ. But today, I just want to come and share with you a few things about working with youth. My background is I've spent 25 years working with youth, and the last 17, 18 years working with youth in multiple contexts. What I'd like to do, as we're going to start, is to share a little story that will give you an idea as to how we're going to proceed. Again, glad to be back. So, let me share a little story for you, or should I say, with you. It was a Sunday afternoon. 96 degrees in the shade, that's how the old song went. 9 years old, sitting at the table in the dining room. It was so hot outside that not even birds wanted to sing. The leaves wouldn't blow. I could feel the perspiration running down my back. My hair was matted with the sweat. And suddenly it was so thick that I could almost taste my perspiration, and it wasn't great. I'm sitting at the table. My mom is in her bedroom, my sister's in her bedroom, and it was going to be an interesting time. I was wondering whether my mom would force me to go to church. It was only 2 o'clock and church was at 4. And at 9 years old, she would have put me in my Clark's shoes, my high brown socks right up to the knee, my short pants right up and belted high, my short sleeve shirt with my bow tie. And even though it was only 15 minutes to go down to the church, I knew that by the time I got to church, I'd be pouring in sweat. But I digress. In my reverie, I'm there thinking about life and the kind of life I wanted at 9 years old. And suddenly I realized that the rediffusion is playing. And it's time for Auntie Olga, who is my mother's favorite radio person. And she's talking about a bride's prayer. And she went on to describe the hopes for her future. The future of all brides, especially those who are going to be married either that Sunday afternoon or the following week. And then in my midst of my reverie, I heard my father's car turn into the driveway. And every nerve, every sense jumped to being. suddenly I could smell the mangoes from the tree. They were warm and juicy. I could just now taste them overloading the flavor of my own perspiration in my mouth. But my heart started to race, jumping up into my throat, because I knew when that car turned into the driveway, it was make or break time for me. You see, my father was an alcoholic. And because of the innocence of my youth at 5 years old, when I caught him in adultery and I told my mother, he rejected me, and I became the target of all of his anger. Actually, he gave me the name, the F word, idiot. He cut me off emotionally, wouldn't do anything with me. He wouldn't show up to my cricket games, my football games, my rugby games, my lawn tennis, as it was called back then, games, my ping pong games. He wouldn't even turn up to our parent-teacher meetings. And I started to have that feeling of being useless, of not having any value. But that Sunday afternoon, it was as if my whole body was terrified. Something different was going to happen. And I knew, and I waited to hear what it would be like when his foot hit the ground as he opened that car door. Because then I knew I was in trouble. Because my father drank exceptionally much on Sundays. And as I heard the engine turn off, the door open, and I heard his foot hit the ground, I knew I needed to hide. But where would I go? What would I do? Who would save me? And as he started coming up the step, stumbling, he started calling my name, Irwin, Irwin. And I knew from the sound of that voice that a good beating was coming. What would I do? And out of the blue, a thought said to me, hide under the table that you're sitting. And I slid like a ninja, moving into that space, my sweat pouring now, right under the 6 chairs that surrounded that table, and I held my breath. As he stumbled in through the sliding doors, he shouted, Irwin! I could hear my mother close the inner bedroom door, because she didn't want to be worried taking on that argument and the conversations that would happen. Couldn't run into my sister's bedroom door because she would complain and he would know that I was in there. What would I do? And he stumbled in and his voice rose again, Irwin! My heart was beating. I could feel the pounding of the blood in my ears, and it stopped breathing. Because he was so drunk, he couldn't hear me. And then he went and he sat on the couch. And he collapsed on the couch and fell asleep and started snoring. I waited for a few moments. Even 3 minutes, it felt like an eternity. And then I slid from underneath the top of the table and the chairs which across my body was. I slid on the floor, crawled into the kitchen, jumped up, ran to the back door, hopped over the barrier that kept the dogs from in the house, down the steps into the backyard, through the gate, and I ran and I hid up at the top of the mango tree. And as I got to the top of the mango tree, he woke up again and started shouting for me, came to the windows, those plain paned windows, the louver windows, and he looked all around and he's shouting for me. I knew if I moved, he would come and get me, as drunk as he was. I knew this was a turning point in my life. This was a crossroads. And then he turned back and went back into the house. I waited 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes before I came down, daring to come back into the house. And I'm moving around corner by corner over the barrier at the back of the kitchen, into the kitchen area, slid around the corner of the walls that separated the dining room to the living room. I could hear him snoring. And as I looked and peeped around the corner, I saw him flat on his back on the couch, 1 foot up, 1 foot down. His shirt opened, his mouth opened, and he's snoring gutturally. The stench of the rum and whiskey and the corned beef and biscuits with onions that he'd eaten, they were there. And a sense of resentment arose in me, mixed with fear and anger and disgust. As a result of these many things and interactions with my father, I became, partly because of him, the person I am today. I was afraid of having children because I was afraid I was going to do to my children what he'd done to me. I grew up hopeless, a sense of helplessness, academically gifted but no confidence to do anything. There was even a time I attempted suicide at age 13. This is some of what has caused me to step into the field that I'm in. I've worked several years with young people who have alcoholic parents, parents who have drug addictions, food addictions, who just cannot step away from crime. And they don't want it, but they will do anything and everything in order to find acceptance and a sense of value, which is why gangs form such a place of safety, even though it provides abuse. It can cost you everything. This is why I do what I do. I was instrumental in setting up a program called Jobs for America's Graduates, where I worked over 7 years in particular with students who wouldn't even be able to get any certificates, whether it's CXCs, GCEs, nothing, who would drop out of high school. No rent, no job, no skills. They'd either get involved in pushing, selling drugs, stealing, robbing, even murder, because of the kind of environment within which they grew. That is why I do what I do. And now I work with parents. What I want you to understand is that there's an old song that says, children are our future, treat them well and let them lead the way. But if we scar them to the point where they have no sense of self-worth, and all they do then is repeat the cycle. We live here in Grenada, the Spice Isle. We have so many people who dream of coming and visiting Grenada, and we do see them. But we also recognize that many of our youth do not have the opportunities, not because they don't want them. Many of our youth are seeking skills to become entrepreneurs, but they lack the resources and that sense of investment. This is not unique to Grenada. It is everywhere, in the first world countries or the developing countries. And because of some of the things that have happened to me, that sense of injustice drives me. Today, that was an introduction to who I am, why I am, and what God is doing with me. I look forward to sharing some more with some of the things that we can do for our youth. Not tomorrow, starting today. It is not enough for our churches, the Church of the Living God, to just want to feed, shelter, and lead them. We need to walk beside them. Thank you, and I look forward to the next session where I can share some more.